Look at this ghetto trash, thinking she can outsmart the system. Officer Bradley Thompson's words explode through the packed courtroom like a bomb. His white face contorts with pure hatred as he towers over Samantha Rivera. The vicious slur makes several spectators recoil in shock. Thompson seizes the evidence bag containing $8,000 and hurls it onto the prosecutor's table. Bills explode across the polished wood in a chaotic mess. He whips around to face the gallery, his eyes blazing with superiority. "Your Honor, criminals like this always have some sob story ready." His finger stabs toward Rivera like he's pointing at garbage. The disgusting contempt in his voice makes people's skin crawl. Phone cameras capture every second of his racist performance. But Samantha Rivera remains stone-cold still. Her spine stays rigid, her dark eyes locked on Thompson with laser focus. She watches him like a hunter studying prey. Have you ever seen someone dig their own grave with their mouth? 6 hours earlier, Samantha Rivera's alarm clock buzzed at exactly 6 a.m. in her modest Virginia apartment. Sunlight streamed through thin curtains, casting gentle shadows across the hardwood floors. The scent of fresh coffee already filled the kitchen where her automatic timer had started brewing. Rivera's morning routine moved with military precision. Her bed corners pulled hospital tight, every wrinkle smoothed away. She dropped to the floor for 50 perfect push-ups, her breathing controlled and steady. The old floorboards creaked under her weight, but her form never wavered. Her 8-year-old daughter Maya padded into the kitchen, still rubbing sleep from her eyes. Rivera wrapped her arms around the little girl, planting a soft kiss on her forehead. The gentle gesture showed a completely different side of this woman who would soon face hell itself. "Morning, baby girl. Are you ready for your math test today?" Maya nodded sleepily as Rivera prepared scrambled eggs and toast. The kitchen smelled like butter and warmth, a stark contrast to the cold courtroom where this story began. On the refrigerator, Maya's honor roll certificates hung next to a single photo of Rivera in military dress uniform, though the details remained hidden behind grocery lists and school schedules. Rivera worked as a community outreach coordinator for veterans at the Fairfax Community Center. The building buzzed with activity when she arrived at 8:30 a.m. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead as she unlocked her office door, revealing walls covered with thank you letters from former service members. Her desk held neat stacks of case files, each representing a veteran struggling to transition back to civilian life. Rivera understood their pain in ways most people couldn't. She'd walked that same difficult path herself, trading military structure for the chaos of regular society. "Good morning, Sam," called her colleague Jennifer from across the hallway. "Ready for the homeless outreach meeting?" Rivera nodded, grabbing her notebook and heading to the conference room. 20 volunteers sat around a circular table, discussing how to help veterans living on the streets. Rivera's voice carried natural authority as she spoke about PTSD, employment challenges, and the struggle to find purpose after military service. "These men and women served our country," she said, her words carrying the weight of personal experience. "They deserve better than sleeping in doorways and begging for spare change." Nobody in that room knew Rivera had earned a Bronze Star and Purple Heart during her 12 years as a Navy SEAL. To them, she was simply a dedicated advocate who cared deeply about forgotten heroes. Around 2:15 p.m., Rivera gathered her purse and car keys. She had a dentist appointment across town and needed to leave early. The autumn air felt crisp against her skin as she walked to her 2019 Honda Civic in the parking lot. The car was modest but well-maintained, its silver paint job showing careful attention. Rivera had never been one for flashy displays of wealth. She preferred reliability over status symbols, a mindset shaped by years of military service where function mattered more than form. She turned the radio to NPR as she pulled onto the road. A story about racial justice reforms played through the speakers, discussing police accountability measures across the country. Rivera shook her head at the irony, having no idea she was about to become the center of such a story herself. The route to her dentist took her through a quiet residential neighborhood where tree-lined streets showcased well-kept homes and manicured lawns. Children's bicycles lay scattered on driveways, and American flags hung from several porches. It was the kind of place where families felt safe, where people trusted their local police. Rivera had chosen this particular dentist because the office accepted her insurance and offered flexible scheduling for working parents. She'd been planning to pick up Maya from school afterward and take her for ice cream to celebrate the math test. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maya's teacher, confirming the little girl had aced her exam. Rivera smiled, thinking about how proud she felt of her daughter's dedication to education. Maya wanted to be a doctor someday, and Rivera was determined to make that dream possible. As she drove down Maple Street at exactly 25 miles per hour, Rivera had no idea that Officer Bradley Thompson was already watching her through his rearview mirror. She didn't know that her skin color had caught his attention, or that his twisted mind was already forming assumptions about why a black woman was driving through his neighborhood. The peaceful afternoon was about to shatter into a nightmare that would test everything Rivera had learned about courage, dignity, and justice during her military service. The red and blue lights exploded in Rivera's rearview mirror at exactly 3:15 p.m. The sudden flash of color made her heart skip, but her hands remained steady on the steering wheel. She'd done nothing wrong, yet those flashing lights triggered memories of roadside stops she'd witnessed during her military service overseas. Officer Bradley Thompson sat in his patrol car for a full 2 minutes, deliberately letting the tension build. His pale fingers drummed against the steering wheel as he studied the woman in the Honda Civic. 42 years old, with 15 years on the force, Thompson had developed a reputation for aggressive policing in neighborhoods he considered his territory. Rivera pulled over smoothly, her military training kicking in automatically. She placed both hands on the steering wheel where they could be clearly seen, turned off the engine, and waited. The afternoon sun beat down through her windshield, making sweat bead on her forehead despite the cool October air. Thompson finally emerged from his vehicle, his heavy boots crunching on the asphalt as he approached. His hand rested near his weapon, a clear intimidation tactic for what should have been a routine traffic stop. The neighborhood around them had gone quiet, as if sensing the tension crackling in the air. "License and registration," Thompson barked, not bothering with pleasantries. His pale blue eyes scanned Rivera's face with obvious disdain. "Do you know why I stopped you?" Rivera's voice remained calm and respectful. "No, sir. I was following the speed limit and traffic laws." The politeness in her tone seemed to irritate Thompson further. His jaw clenched as he snatched the documents from her extended hand. "Really? Because your vehicle matches the description of one involved in suspicious financial activity in this area." The lie rolled off his tongue with practiced ease. Rivera's eyebrows raised slightly, but she maintained her composure. "I'm sorry, officer, but there must be some mistake." "I work at the community center and was heading to a dentist appointment." Thompson's face flushed red at her articulate response. In his twisted worldview, people who looked like Rivera weren't supposed to speak with such education and confidence. It challenged his fundamental beliefs about racial superiority and social order. "Step out of the vehicle," he commanded, his voice rising unnecessarily. "I need to verify some information." Rivera complied without argument, moving with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to following orders. But her cooperation only seemed to fuel Thompson's anger. He'd been hoping for resistance, something to justify the aggressive approach he was already planning. As Rivera stood beside her car, Thompson made a show of examining her license with exaggerated suspicion. "Community Outreach Coordinator," he read aloud with mocking emphasis. "Sure you are. What kind of outreach exactly?" The racial undertone was unmistakable. Rivera felt her jaw tighten, but years of military discipline kept her expression neutral. "I help veterans transition back to civilian life, sir. We provide job training, housing assistance, and counseling services." Thompson snorted with derision. "Right. And I'm sure you know all about veteran issues." His voice dripped with sarcasm, completely unaware of the irony in his words. By now, several neighbors had emerged from their homes, drawn by the commotion. Mrs. Chen from next door recognized Rivera immediately. She was the kind woman who'd helped carry groceries just last week. A couple of teenagers discreetly pulled out their phones, sensing something wasn't right about this traffic stop. Thompson noticed the growing audience and seemed to relish the attention. He puffed out his chest and raised his voice, ensuring everyone could hear his next words. "Ma'am, I have reasonable suspicion to search your vehicle for evidence of illegal activity." Rivera's military training had included extensive education about civil rights and proper procedures. "Officer, with respect, do you have probable cause for such a search? I've committed no traffic violations." Her knowledge of legal procedures hit Thompson like a slap in the face. Most people he harassed were too intimidated to question his authority. This woman's calm confidence threatened the power dynamic he relied on to control situations. "Don't you dare lecture me about probable cause," Thompson snarled, stepping closer to invade her personal space. "I smell suspicious odors coming from your vehicle." Another lie, but one that gave him legal cover for what he planned to do next. Rivera knew exactly what was happening. She'd seen similar tactics used against civilians in conflict zones. The abuse of authority was textbook, and she recognized the pattern immediately. Thompson began his search with theatrical precision, making sure the growing crowd of onlookers could see every move. He opened the driver's door and began rifling through Rivera's belongings with obvious hostility. Her gym bag, work folders, and Maya's forgotten homework assignments were scattered across the pavement. "Officer Walsh," Thompson called to his backup, who had just arrived on scene, "come witness this search." Jennifer Walsh was 28 years old and relatively new to the force. She'd heard rumors about Thompson's methods but had never seen them firsthand. As she approached the scene, something in her stomach turned. The woman being searched looked completely non-threatening, and the hostile energy radiating from Thompson felt wrong. Rivera watched Thompson's performance with growing concern. She could see the calculation in his movements, the way he was positioning himself to block certain angles from the onlooker's view. Her military experience had taught her to read body language and tactical positioning, and everything about this situation screamed setup. Well, what do we have here?" Thompson's voice carried across the street with fake surprise. He straightened up from the glove compartment, his hand emerging with a clear plastic bag containing what appeared to be a substantial amount of cash. Bills were visible through the transparent material, and Thompson held it high enough for everyone to see. Rivera's blood ran cold. "That's not mine," she said firmly, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being believed. "Officer, I've never seen that money before in my life." But Thompson was already in full performance mode, turning toward the crowd with the evidence bag raised like a trophy. $8,000 in unmarked bills hidden in the glove compartment. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for suspected money laundering and possession of proceeds from illegal activity." The neighbors gasped and murmured among themselves. Some recognized Rivera and knew this couldn't be right. Mrs. Chen stepped forward, her elderly voice calling out, "That's Ms. Rivera! She helps veterans. She's a good person." Thompson's head snapped toward the old woman with venomous irritation. "Ma'am, step back. This is official police business, and I won't have civilians interfering with my investigation." His tone toward Mrs. Chen was sharp enough to make several people flinch. The contrast between his treatment of the elderly Asian woman and his outright hostility toward Rivera painted a clear picture of his character. Officer Walsh shifted uncomfortably behind her senior partner. Something about the whole scene felt rehearsed, like Thompson had been planning this moment. The way he'd found the money seemed too convenient, too perfectly timed for maximum public humiliation. Rivera's mind raced through her options. She could see the phone's recording, which might work in her favor later. But for now, she was trapped in a nightmare scenario with no immediate way out. Thompson had manufactured evidence and was using his badge to legitimize a racist attack. Turn around and place your hands behind your back, Thompson commanded, pulling out his handcuffs with obvious satisfaction. You have the right to remain silent, but I doubt you'll use it. The metal cuffs clicked shut around Rivera's wrists with unnecessary force. Thompson tightened them beyond what was required, ensuring they would leave marks on her skin. Every action was calculated to maximize her humiliation and his sense of power. As Thompson guided her toward his patrol car, Rivera caught sight of the teenagers still filming. Their faces showed shock and anger at what they were witnessing. She made mental note of their positions, hoping their footage would survive whatever Thompson had planned next. The short walk to the police car felt like a mile. Every step was captured on multiple phones, documenting what would soon become a pivotal moment in a story about justice, prejudice, and the dangerous consequences of underestimating your target. The patrol car's vinyl seats cracked under Rivera's weight as Thompson slammed the door shut. The sound echoed through the neighborhood like a gunshot, making several onlookers flinch. Behind the bulletproof partition, the air reeked of stale coffee and the lingering scent of fear from previous arrests. Thompson slid into the driver's seat with obvious satisfaction, adjusting his rearview mirror to catch Rivera's eyes. His pale face glowed with the sick pleasure of someone who believed he'd just scored a major victory against an undeserving enemy. "Comfortable back there?" he asked with mock concern, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Hope you enjoyed your little charade because it's over now." Rivera remained silent, her military training screaming at her to stay calm and observe. Every word Thompson spoke was digging his grave deeper, and she wanted to remember every detail for the legal battle that would surely follow. The radio crackled to life as Thompson pulled away from the curb. "Dispatch, this is Unit 247. I've got a suspected money laundering suspect in custody. Female, black, approximately 35 years old, found $8,000 in unmarked bills during a routine traffic stop." His voice carried the practiced tone of someone reporting legitimate police work, but Rivera could hear the underlying excitement. Thompson was enjoying this performance far too much for it to be genuine law enforcement. "Copy that, 247, came the dispatcher's voice. "Transport to central booking for processing." As they drove through the neighborhood, Thompson's mask began to slip. His professional facade cracked, revealing the ugly prejudice that had motivated this entire encounter. "You people always think you're so smart," he muttered, glancing at Rivera through the mirror. "Coming into decent neighborhoods with your fancy cars and your attitude. But I see right through you." The racial venom in his voice made Rivera's skin crawl, but she forced herself to remain expressionless. Every word was evidence of his true motivations, and she filed each statement away in her memory. Thompson's rant continued as they stopped at a red light. "I bet you think that a community center job makes you respectable, but we both know what kind of outreach you really do. Drug money doesn't earn itself." The light turned green, but Thompson accelerated too quickly, causing Rivera to slam against the seat partition. Whether intentional or not, the rough driving served as another form of intimidation. "Tell me something," Thompson said, his voice taking on a conversational tone that somehow felt more threatening than his previous anger. "How's your daughter going to feel when she finds out Mommy's a criminal?" Rivera's composure cracked for just a moment. Her jaw tightened at the mention of Maya, and Thompson caught the reaction in his mirror. His smile widened like a shark sensing blood in the water. "Oh, that got your attention, didn't it? Don't worry, Child Protective Services will take good care of her while you're in prison. Probably better than living with a drug dealer." The words hit Rivera like physical blows. This wasn't just about her anymore. Thompson was threatening her child. The protective fury that rose in her chest took all her military discipline to contain. Thompson pulled into the police station parking lot, but instead of heading straight to booking, he parked in a far corner away from the building's security cameras. The isolation felt deliberate and ominous. "Before we go inside," Thompson said, turning to face Rivera through the partition, "I want you to understand something. This is my town, my department, my rules. You can play innocent all you want, but nobody's going to believe some ghetto queen over a decorated police officer. His words carried the confidence of someone who'd played this game before and won. Rivera realized this wasn't Thompson's first time manufacturing evidence against an innocent person. The casual cruelty suggested years of practice. "I've been doing this for 15 years, Thompson continued, his voice low and menacing. "I know exactly how to write reports that stick. Your fancy lawyer friends won't be able to save you from federal money laundering charges." The federal angle was new information that made Rivera's blood run cold. Thompson wasn't just planning to destroy her locally, he intended to involve federal authorities, which could mean decades in prison. Thompson's radio squawked again. "Unit 247, what's your ETA for booking?" "A few more minutes," Thompson replied smoothly. "Suspect is being uncooperative. Need to review procedures." The lie came so easily that Rivera wondered how many other victims had suffered in this same back seat while Thompson enjoyed his power trip. "You know what the best part is?" Thompson asked, turning back to Rivera with gleaming eyes. "Even if some bleeding heart jury believes your sob story, the damage is already done. Your reputation, your job, your kid's future, all destroyed. And there's nothing you can do about it." Rivera's hands, still cuffed behind her back, clenched into fists. The metal cut into her wrists, but the pain helped her focus. She'd faced enemy combatants who showed more honor than this badge-wearing predator. Thompson finally drove to the booking entrance where Officer Walsh waited with obvious discomfort. Her young face showed confusion and concern as she watched Thompson emerge from the vehicle with theatrical authority. "Walsh, help me escort the suspect inside," Thompson commanded. "She's been making threats during transport." Another lie, delivered with such casual confidence that Rivera almost admired the skill involved. Thompson had transformed a silent car ride into a fictional narrative that painted her as dangerous and uncooperative. Inside the station, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry insects. The booking area smelled of disinfectant and desperation, a combination that seemed fitting for what was happening to Rivera's life. Thompson guided Rivera to the fingerprinting station with unnecessary force, his grip on her arm tight enough to leave bruises. Every interaction was designed to demonstrate his complete control over her situation. "Full name for the record," demanded the booking sergeant, a tired-looking man in his 50s who'd obviously processed thousands of arrests. "Samantha Maria Rivera," she replied clearly, maintaining her dignity despite the humiliating circumstances. Thompson interjected before she could continue. "Suspect was found with $8,000 in unmarked bills during a routine traffic stop. Appeared nervous and evasive when questioned about the source of the money." Rivera opened her mouth to object, but Thompson cut her off. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in court. I'd recommend staying quiet until your lawyer arrives." The fake concern in his voice made Rivera's stomach turn. Thompson was building his narrative layer by layer, turning her silence into evidence of guilt rather than smart legal strategy. As the booking process continued, Rivera noticed other officers watching with varying degrees of discomfort. Some seemed to accept Thompson's version of events without question, but others exchanged glances that suggested skepticism. Officer Walsh stood in the corner, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. She kept glancing between Thompson and Rivera with an expression that looked increasingly troubled. Rivera caught her eye for a moment and saw doubt flickering there. "Property inventory," announced the booking sergeant, beginning to catalog Rivera's belongings. Her purse, car keys, and work identification were methodically documented and sealed in evidence bags. Thompson examined Rivera's ID card from the community center with exaggerated suspicion. "Veterans Outreach Coordinator," he read aloud for the room. "Convenient cover story for someone running money." The suggestion that helping veterans was somehow criminal made several officers look up with surprise. Even in a room full of law enforcement, Thompson's contempt for military service seemed to cross a line. Rivera's phone buzzed in the evidence bag, probably Maya texting about her math test. The thought of her daughter waiting for ice cream while her mother sat in a jail cell made Rivera's chest tight with rage and heartbreak. "Detention cell 3, Thompson announced, clearly savoring the moment. "Make sure she gets the full treatment. Federal investigators will want to interview her tomorrow about her money laundering operation." As Rivera was led toward the holding cells, she could hear Thompson already on the phone with someone, probably beginning the process of destroying her life on a federal level. His voice carried down the hallway, filled with fake concern about dangerous criminals infiltrating decent communities. The cell door clanged shut with metallic finality. Rivera sat on the hard bench and closed her eyes, drawing on meditation techniques learned during her military service. Thompson thought he'd won, but he had no idea who he was really dealing with. In less than 24 hours, this entire situation would be flipped on its head in ways Thompson couldn't possibly imagine. The Fairfax County Courthouse buzzed with unusual energy on Tuesday morning. Word had spread through the legal community about the federal money laundering case, and the gallery filled with curious spectators, reporters, and community members who knew Rivera personally. Thompson strode into the courtroom like a conquering hero, his dress uniform pressed to perfection. Every brass button gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and his chest puffed out with the confidence of someone who believed victory was guaranteed. He nodded at the prosecutor with the casual familiarity of someone who'd testified in dozens of similar cases. Rivera sat at the defendant's table beside her court-appointed attorney, Sarah Martinez. The public defender looked overwhelmed by the federal implications of the case, her manila folders scattered across the table in organized chaos. Rivera's orange jumpsuit stood in stark contrast to Thompson's pristine uniform. "The prosecution calls Officer Bradley Thompson to the stand," announced Assistant District Attorney Michael Harrison, an ambitious young prosecutor eager to make his mark with a high-profile federal case. Thompson took the witness stand with theatrical precision, his right hand raised as he swore to tell the truth. The irony wasn't lost on Rivera, who watched every movement with the tactical awareness of someone trained to read enemy behavior. "Officer Thompson," Harrison began, "please describe the events of October 10th for the court." Thompson's voice carried the practiced authority of someone accustomed to being believed without question. "Your Honor, at approximately 3:15 p.m., I observed the defendant driving in an erratic manner through the Maple Street residential area. Her behavior appeared suspicious and consistent with someone engaged in illegal activity." Rivera's attorney scribbled notes, but Rivera could see the doubt in Martinez's eyes. The public defender was outgunned by Thompson's experience and the prosecutor's federal resources. "What happened next?" Harrison prompted. Thompson leaned forward with fake sincerity. "When I approached the vehicle, the defendant appeared extremely nervous and evasive. She couldn't provide a satisfactory explanation for why she was in that particular neighborhood." The lie rolled off his tongue with sickening ease. Rivera remembered her calm cooperation, her clear explanation about the dentist appointment, her respectful compliance with every request. "During my lawful search of the vehicle," Thompson continued, "I discovered $8,000 in unmarked bills concealed in the glove compartment. The defendant claimed ignorance, but her body language suggested deception." Harrison nodded approvingly. "In your professional opinion, Officer Thompson, what did this discovery suggest?" "Classic money laundering operation," Thompson replied with authority. "Large amounts of unmarked cash, hidden in a vehicle, combined with the defendant's suspicious behavior and presence in a neighborhood known for drug activity." Rivera felt her jaw clench. Maple Street was one of the safest areas in the county, hardly a hotbed of criminal activity. But Thompson's confident delivery made even obvious lies sound plausible. The prosecutor yielded to the defense, and Sarah Martinez stood nervously. Her hands shook slightly as she approached the witness stand, clearly intimidated by Thompson's commanding presence. "Officer Thompson," Martinez began hesitantly, "you mentioned the defendant appeared nervous. Isn't it normal for people to feel anxious during police stops?" Thompson's smile was condescending. "Perhaps for law-abiding citizens, but this defendant showed signs of guilt," not normal nervousness. Martinez consulted her notes, clearly struggling with the line of questioning. Rivera could see the young lawyer was out of her depth against Thompson's practiced testimony. "You stated the defendant couldn't explain her presence in the neighborhood," Martinez continued. "Did she actually provide an explanation?" "She claimed to have a dentist appointment," Thompson replied with a dismissive wave. "Obviously a fabricated story designed to justify suspicious behavior." Rivera whispered urgently to her attorney, sliding a business card across the table. Martinez glanced at it, and her eyebrows raised slightly. Dr. Patricia Hoffman, DDS, the same dentist Rivera had been heading to see. "Officer Thompson," Martinez said with newfound confidence, "are you familiar with military service protocols?" Thompson's expression shifted to confusion and mild annoyance. "What does military service have to do with this money laundering case?" "Please answer the question," Martinez pressed. "I served briefly in the Army Reserve," Thompson replied dismissively. "But I fail to see the relevance to this criminal matter." Martinez walked to the defense table and picked up a thick manila folder. "Your Honor, I'd like to present Defense Exhibit A to the court." She handed copies to the judge, prosecutor, and Thompson. As Thompson opened the folder, his face went through a spectacular transformation. Confusion gave way to shock, then to barely concealed panic. "Officer Thompson," Martinez announced to the packed courtroom, "please read the name on the first document." Thompson's voice cracked slightly. "Samantha Maria Rivera." "And the title listed below her name?" Thompson's hands visibly trembled as he read, "Petty Officer First Class, United States Navy SEALS." The courtroom erupted in gasps and murmurs. Reporters frantically scribbled notes while spectators leaned forward in their seats. Thompson's face had gone completely white, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool courtroom temperature. 12 years of active duty service," Martinez continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Multiple combat deployments in Afghanistan and Iraq. Bronze Star with V device for valor under fire. Purple Heart for wounds received in action." Thompson's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. The confident officer who had swagger into the courtroom was rapidly disintegrating before everyone's eyes. Judge Patricia Williams leaned forward with intense interest. "Ms. Martinez, are you saying the defendant is a decorated Navy SEAL?" "Yes, Your Honor. Petty Officer Rivera served with distinction in some of the most dangerous missions our country has undertaken. She transitioned to civilian life 3 years ago and has dedicated herself to helping other veterans adjust to civilian life." The gallery behind Rivera was buzzing with excitement and vindication. Mrs. Chen dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, while the teenagers who had filmed the arrest pumped their fists in silent celebration. Thompson sat frozen in the witness chair, the federal money laundering case crumbling around him like a house of cards. The same decorated military service he had mocked was now staring him in the face, exposing every lie he had told. Thompson's hands shook so violently that the service record documents fluttered to the floor like falling leaves. The silence in the courtroom stretched for what felt like an eternity before he managed to croak out his first words since the revelation. "Your Honor, This doesn't change the fact that the money was still—" His voice trailed off as he realized how pathetic he sounded. Judge Williams' expression had transformed from professional neutrality to barely contained fury. Her dark eyes bore into Thompson with the intensity of someone who had just witnessed a grave injustice. Defense Attorney Martinez seized the moment with newfound confidence. "Your Honor, I'd also like to present video evidence obtained from civilian witnesses at the scene." She approached the court's audio-visual system with a USB drive. The large monitor flickered to life, showing crystal-clear footage from one of the teenagers' smartphones. The timestamp showed the exact moment of Rivera's arrest. The courtroom watched in stunned silence as Thompson's lies unraveled in real time. The video showed him approaching Rivera's glove compartment at an angle that blocked most observers' view. His movements were deliberate and suspicious, clearly planting something rather than discovering it. "Oh my God," someone whispered from the gallery. But the most damning moment came when the audio picked up Thompson's racist comments during the arrest. His voice echoed through the courthouse speakers. "People like you don't belong in decent neighborhoods." Several jury members gasped audibly. The prosecutor, Michael Harrison, looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. His ambitious federal case was disintegrating into a civil rights nightmare. Judge Williams removed her glasses and rubbed her temples. "Officer Thompson, did you just witness yourself planting evidence against a decorated Navy SEAL?" Thompson's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Sweat streamed down his face, leaving dark stains on his dress uniform collar. The same uniform he'd worn with such pride now felt like a costume exposing his fraudulent character. The video doesn't show. It's taken out of context." "Bailiff!" Judge Williams' voice cracked like a whip through the courtroom. "Place Officer Thompson under arrest immediately for perjury, evidence tampering, and violation of civil rights under color of law." The courtroom erupted into chaos. Two bailiffs moved swiftly toward the witness stand as Thompson tried to stand on unsteady legs. The same handcuffs he'd used to humiliate Rivera were now clicking around his own wrists with metallic finality. "This is a mistake," Thompson shouted desperately as the bailiffs guided him away from the witness stand. "She's still a criminal." The money proves it. His protests only made him look more pathetic. Several spectators in the gallery stood and began applauding Rivera, who remained seated with dignified composure despite her vindication. Judge Williams banged her gavel repeatedly to restore order. "All charges against Ms. Rivera are hereby dismissed with prejudice. The court apologizes for the grave injustice that has occurred here today." Thompson was led past Rivera's table in handcuffs, and for one brief moment, their eyes met. His face showed a mixture of rage, humiliation, and dawning realization that his career was over. Rivera's expression remained calm, professional, showing the same dignity she'd maintained throughout this entire ordeal. "Your Honor," defense attorney Martinez said, "we will be filing a comprehensive civil rights lawsuit against Officer Thompson and the Fairfax County Police Department for this egregious violation of my client's constitutional rights." Prosecutor Harrison stood reluctantly. "The state will be dropping all charges immediately and launching a full investigation into Officer Thompson's conduct. We deeply regret this miscarriage of justice." As Thompson was escorted from the courtroom, reporters rushed toward their phones and laptops. This story would be national news within hours. A racist cop exposed for framing a decorated Navy SEAL veteran. Officer Jennifer Walsh sat in the back row, her face pale with shock and guilt. She'd known something was wrong during the arrest but had lacked the courage to speak up. Now she watched her partner's career implode in the most public way possible. Rivera finally stood as her handcuffs were removed. The orange jumpsuit couldn't diminish her military bearing as she shook hands with her attorney and accepted congratulations from community supporters who had filled the gallery. Mrs. Chen pushed through the crowd to embrace Rivera, with tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "I knew you were innocent, dear." "I knew it from the beginning." The contrast between this moment and Thompson's racist arrest couldn't have been more striking. The same woman he'd called ghetto trash was being celebrated as a hero who had served her country with distinction. Outside the courthouse, news vans were already arriving as word spread through social media. The teenager's arrest video was going viral, viewed millions of times as people shared their outrage over Thompson's behavior. Thompson sat in a holding cell just floors below, the same type of cell where he'd planned to destroy Rivera's life. The poetic justice wasn't lost on anyone who knew the full story. Justice had prevailed, but this was only the beginning of Thompson's downfall. Within hours of Thompson's arrest, the story exploded across social media platforms like wildfire. The hashtag Navy SEAL Justice trended nationally as millions shared the courtroom footage and arrest video. Rivera's face appeared on CNN, Fox News, and every major network as America grappled with yet another story of police racism and abuse of power. The FBI's Civil Rights Division launched a federal investigation within 48 hours. Special Agent Patricia Coleman arrived at the Fairfax County Police Department with a team of investigators, their black SUVs lined up outside like an occupying force. The message was clear. This case had attracted the highest levels of federal attention. "We're treating this as a potential pattern of civil rights violations," Agent Coleman announced at a press conference. "Officer Thompson's actions represent a systematic abuse of authority that demands thorough investigation." The Bureau's review uncovered a disturbing pattern spanning Thompson's 15-year career. Internal Affairs had received 17 complaints against him, mostly from black and Hispanic citizens, alleging excessive force, racial profiling, and falsified reports. Each complaint had been quietly buried or dismissed without serious investigation. Maria Santos, a Latina teacher, stepped forward with her own story. 2 years earlier, Thompson had pulled her over and planted marijuana in her purse during a traffic stop. The charges were eventually dropped, but not before she lost her teaching job and spent 3 months fighting to clear her name. "I tried to report what happened," Santos told reporters with tears streaming down her face. "But nobody believed me over a police officer. Now I see I wasn't alone." By the end of the first week, 8 more victims had come forward with similar stories. Each case followed the same pattern: racial profiling, planted evidence, and false reports designed to destroy innocent lives. The scope of Thompson's corruption was staggering. The Fairfax County Police Department found itself under intense scrutiny as protesters gathered outside headquarters demanding systemic reform. Chief Margaret Sullivan, a 25-year veteran, held daily press conferences trying to control the growing scandal. "Officer Thompson's actions do not represent the values of this department," Chief Sullivan insisted, but her words rang hollow as more evidence of institutional cover-ups emerged. Rivera used her newfound platform to advocate for police accountability and veteran rights. She appeared on national television with the same calm authority she'd shown in the courtroom, her bronze star visible on her civilian jacket. "This isn't just about what happened to me," Rivera told Anderson Cooper during a CNN interview. "This is about a system that allows racist officers like Thompson to terrorize communities for years without consequences." Her military background lent credibility to her words in ways that other police brutality victims often lacked. Veterans organizations rallied behind her, with the VFW and American Legion issuing statements condemning Thompson's treatment of a decorated war hero. Thompson's trial began 3 months later in federal court, with Judge Robert Martinez presiding. The prosecution team, led by U.S. Attorney Jennifer Walsh, ironically sharing a name with Thompson's former partner, had built an overwhelming case spanning multiple victims and years of misconduct. The courtroom was packed daily with media, civil rights activists, and community members. Rivera attended every session, her presence a constant reminder of Thompson's central victim and the military service he had mocked. Thompson's defense attorney, David Richardson, attempted to portray his client as a dedicated officer who had made mistakes under pressure. But the evidence was damning. Video footage, audio recordings, and testimony from 8 victims painted a picture of systematic racial targeting. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," U.S. Attorney Walsh said during opening statements, "this case is about a police officer who used his badge as a weapon against innocent citizens based solely on the color of their skin." Officer Jennifer Walsh, the younger Walsh who had witnessed Rivera's arrest, testified as a government witness. Her voice shook as she described her suspicions during the original traffic stop and her regret at not speaking up sooner. "I knew something was wrong," she admitted under oath. "Officer Thompson's behavior was aggressive and seemed racially motivated. I should have reported it immediately." The most powerful testimony came from Rivera herself. She took the stand wearing her Navy dress uniform, her service ribbons creating a stark contrast to Thompson's disheveled appearance at the defendant's table. Officer Thompson called me ghetto trash and said people like me don't belong in decent neighborhoods, Rivera testified with quiet dignity. He threatened to have my daughter taken away by Child Protective Services. These weren't the actions of someone enforcing the law. They were the actions of someone abusing it. Expert witnesses testified about implicit bias in policing and the psychological profile of officers who abuse their authority. Dr. Michael Roberts, a criminal justice professor, explained how Thompson's pattern fit classic racist policing behaviors. Officer Thompson specifically targeted victims he perceived as vulnerable, people of color who he believed wouldn't be believed over a white police officer's testimony, Dr. Roberts explained to the jury. The defense presented character witnesses who praised Thompson's earlier career, but their testimony crumbled under cross-examination, revealing his history of complaints and cover-ups. Thompson himself never took the stand, a decision that spoke volumes about his attorney's confidence in the case. His racist comments captured on video played repeatedly throughout the trial, each viewing making him appear more pathetic and hateful. The jury deliberated for only 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts: civil rights violations, evidence tampering, perjury, and conspiracy under color of law. Each count carried potential decades in federal prison. During the sentencing phase, Rivera addressed the court with a victim impact statement that brought several jurors to tears. "Officer Thompson didn't just attack me that day. He attacked everything I fought for during 12 years of military service," she said. "He attacked the idea that all Americans deserve equal protection under the law, regardless of race." Judge Martinez sentenced Thompson to 12 years in federal prison, effectively ending his life as he knew it. The sentence sent shockwaves through law enforcement communities nationwide, serving as a warning that racist policing would face serious consequences. "Your actions were a betrayal of your oath and a disgrace to the badge," Judge Martinez told Thompson during sentencing. "You have brought shame on every honest police officer in America." The civil lawsuit Rivera filed resulted in a $4.2 million settlement from Fairfax County, the largest police misconduct settlement in the jurisdiction's history. She donated half the money to veteran support organizations and used the remainder to establish a legal defense fund for other victims of police misconduct. The Fairfax County Police Department underwent mandatory reforms, including body cameras for all officers, implicit bias training, and an independent civilian oversight board with real investigative power. Officer Jennifer Walsh became a whistleblower advocate, speaking at police academies about the importance of reporting misconduct. Her courage in testifying against Thompson helped establish new protections for officers who report abuse by colleagues. Thompson's case became a textbook example in law schools and police academies across the country, studied as both a warning about the consequences of racist policing and an example of how justice can prevail when institutions are held accountable. 2 years later, Samantha Rivera stood behind a podium at the National Police Academy, addressing a room full of rookie officers. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating her Navy SEAL service ribbons and the confident bearing that had never wavered, even during her darkest moment. "My name is Samantha Rivera," she began, her voice carrying the same calm authority that had sustained her through Thompson's racist attack. "And I'm here to tell you about the day a police officer tried to destroy my life because of the color of my skin." The young faces in the audience listened with rapt attention. These future law enforcement officers were learning her story as part of mandatory training on constitutional policing and civil rights. Rivera's case had become a required curriculum in police academies across the nation. As the director of community police relations for Fairfax County, Rivera had transformed the relationship between law enforcement and the community. Complaints against officers had dropped by 60%, while community trust in police had reached an all-time high. Her daughter Maya, now 10 years old, sat in the front row beaming with pride. The little girl who had once worried about her mother's arrest now understood that her mom was a hero fighting for justice. Maya's math grades remained perfect, and she still talked about becoming a doctor. but now she also mentioned wanting to help people like her mother did. The reforms we've implemented aren't just policies on paper, Rivera continued. They're promises to every citizen that badge will protect, not persecute, regardless of race or background. 300 miles away, Bradley Thompson sat in his federal prison cell, staring at the concrete walls that had become his world. The man who once strutted through courtrooms with arrogant authority now spent his days in isolation, marked as a former police officer among a population that despised corrupt cops. His wife had divorced him within 6 months of his sentencing. His children refused to visit or take his calls. The pension he'd counted on for retirement was gone, seized to help pay victim settlements. At 54 years old, Thompson faced 8 more years in prison, followed by a lifetime as a registered felon. The contrast between his current situation and Rivera's success wasn't lost on anyone who knew their story. Where Thompson had tried to use racism to destroy lives, Rivera used her experience to save them. The reforms Rivera championed had spread far beyond Fairfax County. 17 states had passed legislation requiring civilian oversight boards for police departments. Body camera requirements became standard nationwide. Most importantly, officers who witnessed misconduct were now legally protected when reporting abuse by colleagues. Officer Jennifer Walsh had become a national advocate for police accountability. The young officer who had stayed silent during Rivera's arrest now traveled the country speaking about the courage required to challenge bad cops. Her testimony had been instrumental in protecting whistleblower officers in departments across America. "I learned that day that silence in the face of injustice makes you complicit," Walsh told audiences at police conferences. "We have a duty to protect citizens from officers who abuse their authority." Rivera's legal defense fund had helped dozens of other victims fight false charges and police misconduct. The $2.1 million she'd donated had freed innocent people and sent corrupt officers to prison. Each victory added to the growing momentum for police accountability. The teenage witnesses who had filmed Rivera's arrest were now college students, still active in civil rights advocacy. Their quick thinking to record Thompson's abuse had sparked a national conversation about the power of citizen journalism in exposing police corruption. Mrs. Chen, now 82, remained Rivera's neighbor and friend. The elderly woman who had spoken up during the arrest continued to be an advocate for community police cooperation. Her courage in defending Rivera had inspired other witnesses to speak up when they saw injustice. "What happened to me could happen to anyone," Rivera told the police academy audience as her presentation concluded. "But what happened after? The accountability, the justice, the reform, that only happens when good people refuse to stay silent." The room erupted in applause as Rivera finished her speech. Several rookie officers approached afterward, thanking her for her service and asking how they could be better police officers. These conversations gave Rivera hope that Thompson's racist legacy was being replaced by a new generation committed to constitutional policing. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to understand the importance of accountability, Rivera said, looking directly into the cameras recording her presentation. Subscribe to stay updated on police reform efforts happening across our nation. She paused, her military bearing evident as she delivered her final message. Comment below about your own experiences with police, both good and bad. Like this video if you believe all public servants should be held to the highest standards, regardless of their position. Rivera's eyes held the same steel they'd shown in Thompson's patrol car, but now they also carried hope. Follow for more stories about justice prevailing over prejudice, because change only happens when we demand it. The final question hung in the air like a challenge. The next time you witness injustice, will you stay silent and become complicit? Or will you be the voice that demands accountability? Because sometimes the person being underestimated might just be the one with the power to change everything.
The story you heard today wasn't cleaned up. It was told exactly as it happened. At Black Voices Uncut, we believe That's the only way truth can live. If you felt something, hit like, comment, and your reaction, and subscribe. Every week, we bring you voices that refuse to be silenced.